But if all those things have been dealt with, you're not fat, you're not lazy, you're chasing excellence, you're on a purpose, you have a grind, you're doing something interesting in your life, you're a handsome guy, you've got some style, you're captivating, you're funny, all that shit that women want you to tick off all the fucking boxes on. If you're doing all that stuff already and she's not responding and you're not getting what you want, guys, lots of dudes go out of the marriage. All right, what's up, my brothers? So in this video, we're going to be dealing with the controversial issue of men not getting enough sex in a marriage or a long-term relationship. It generally happens in a marriage. I've talked to loads of guys about this on consults. I got a conversation here that I'm going to read to you in a second and provide some feedback to sort of frame the struggle as many men have it. Those of you that are married that are dealing with this, listen up. Those of you that are contemplating marriage, listen up, because this happens to a lot of guys. Anyway, this dude says he's 30, calls his wife his partner. Stop calling your wife your partner, guys. That's silly. Stop using these generic terms. If she's your girlfriend, call her your girlfriend, not your partner. If she's your wife, call her your wife, okay? Anyway, he's been with her for 10 years, since they were 19 and 20 respectively. They've got a young daughter together, a house, etc. The white picket fence, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he says, my partner, of course, you know, start by calling her your wife again, is the opposite to me in sex drive. She has none, whereas I do. We have sex typically once every 4 to 6 weeks because that's all she wants to do. But even then, she makes a fuss about doing it. I have to ask if we can have sex, and then it's manufactured in a routine where we finish. She's like, are you done now? Can I get on with my day? Which is weird in itself. Yeah, I made a sexual remark on the weekend, and she responded with, when our daughter is at preschool, we can't. Anyway, today is that day, so I made a move on her, and she was like, no, I always feel so forced to have sex, and I have no desire, end quote. At which point I say, okay, well, if you don't want to, we don't have to. Anyway, he says, edit, within the last 6 weeks, I've taken my family on an all-inclusive holiday to Cuba for 2 weeks. It's been my 30th birthday, and still, no sex. She made a statement about how all I want is sex, which isn't true, because if it was what I'd find in a relationship, we'd have sex more than once every 6 weeks. I walked upstairs after this interaction back to my office to do some work, and I've been thinking about what she said about feeling forced to have sex with me, is what she's saying. It's not right, and I don't really know how to combat this and these words. Do I just give up about ever having sex and just accept that it's likely going to have sex 5 to 10 times a year? Is there any way for me to improve this relationship? Well, I have some answers for you. Well, as a level of some comfort and maybe understanding on the subject, one of the most popular terms that guys search for that are married is, how do I get my wife to have sex with me, or how do I get my wife to bang me? Things like that, some version of it, because it's a struggle that a lot of guys deal with. And look, at the end of the day, some of it's on you and some of it's on her. So let's talk about the stuff that you can control, and of course deal with the stuff that you can't control, in the sense that you ain't gonna control it. So let's go back to you. Usually what I find in situations like this, and this guy didn't talk about it explicitly, but there's always some indication somewhere that you as the guy aren't the same dude that she knew 10 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever it happened to be when you first got together, but something's changed in you. Because a woman that is enthusiastic about you and enthusiastically wants to have sex with you, you know, 7, 10 years ago, for example, there's really no reason why that can't continue into time. It will go down a little bit, but there's no reason why she wouldn't want to enthusiastically bang you on a long-term basis. So one thing that you got to understand is that this is not a problem that just you are dealing with. A lot of men deal with the, I'm not getting laid in my marriage. It is a very popular search that guys use online. How do I get my wife to bang me? Why won't my wife have sex with me? A lot of men, you know, will go and resort to porn. Some guys will resort to going outside of the marriage and cheating, you know, get their exercise there. We'll deal with options in a little bit, but one of the common denominators in many of these equations is, if you've changed over time, you've gotten lazy. There's also the concept of betatization through 1,000 concessions, and that's a big turn off, you know, to women. I talk about this in my book as well, but essentially it starts with simple stuff like, hey Rich, don't brush your teeth over there, you're gonna get toothpaste on the toilet. Hey Rich, pick up your socks and put the dark socks in the dark hamper and the white socks in the white hamper. And most women at this point in the comments will be like, well, that just makes normal sense. Fine, but what women don't understand, and they're not doing this intentionally to betatize you guys, is they're putting you through this sequence of shit tests, you know, essentially, where they're like, do this and then do that and do this and do that. And it gets to the point where after a few years of that relationship, you've basically given her a stamp, and every time she says something like, do, it's like, yes, 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 you just stamp everything yes. And women don't like yes men. They really don't. They'll tell you that they want you to be more agreeable and do everything they say to do within their parameters and all that bullshit. But at the end of the day, they don't like yes men. So when there's a conflict between what women say and what they respond to, believe their response and their behavior. Don't always believe what they're saying. So just some clarity on that. So the betatization process is a reality. Most men go through it. It's unknowing. The vast majority of men in long-term relationships go through betatization because they will be shit tested. They will be asked and told to do certain things, you know, for the sake or the brevity of the relationship or the marriage and how they run their lives, sort of stuff like that. It's not to your advantage, men. Be somewhat disagreeable. You do not need to agree to everything. You don't have to be a yes man. In fact, it's to your advantage not to be. You should be leading the relationship at the end of the day, but that's another conversation completely. So there's the betatization component. Don't go through betatization through 1,000 concessions. Learn to say no. And this is actually a really good test when you're dating her early on. Tell her no. When she asks you to do something, even if it's somewhat reasonable, just say no and see how she responds to it. You know, is she going to be okay with her not always getting her way? Because that's what you have to do to not go through betatization through 1,000 concessions, is be able to say no from time to time and hold some firm ground. So there's that. The other component of it too is a lot of guys, as they get in a LTR and they get comfortable, they sometimes get lazy, you know? And I've always told guys it's incredibly important to chase excellence in your life. You know, you really can't relax or retire as a man. Being on some sort of purpose, some sort of grind, and we don't do this for women, by the way, for those of you that are like, oh, he's just a pussy beggar or whatever. No, you do it for yourself, bozo. You do it for yourself so that you are the best version of yourself, so that you're always on the ground running, you're always leveling up, and you're getting things out of your life that you want. You have to hustle, you know? I know that not everybody's always built for this, fine, but you have to have some degree of hustle in your life. You have to have some pep in your step. What most guys do is they get married, they start packing on some weight, they start eating some shitty food, they stop going to the gym, they stop playing the extracurriculars that they used to do when they would play hockey with the boys on Monday night and soccer on Thursday night, sort of thing. And, you know, in some cases it's because the family, or maybe she's making, you know, certain demands of you. You have to do this with the family, you have to do that. And we have this now on Monday nights, so you can't play hockey. That's part of the betatization, by the way. So, you know what to do with that, because we just talked about that earlier. But don't let yourself get lazy and fat. Don't let yourself get poor. Don't be incompetent. One of the big complaints that I heard from quite a few women, you know, in the past as well, is they can't stand it when a guy just does nothing, you know, with their spare time outside of work. Well, all he does is he just sits on the couch and watches sports, and he has Cheeto dust all over his shirt and his clothes, and he's a bum and blah, 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 and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, she's not going to be turned on by that, right? You know, just going to your 9-to-5 job or whatever it happens to be and coming home, and then, you know, like the mortgage is being paid sort of thing. You can't sit around on your ass all day doing nothing with your life and your time. Be on a purpose, be on a grind, make some money, make sure your health is taken care of, maintain the 1.62 goal to ratio. Because at the end of the day, if the marriage or the relationship isn't going to work out and you have to untie the knot or you have to get out of it, you want to hit the ground running. You don't want to be stuck in a situation where, you know, you're getting divorced and you're like 350 pounds and 5'10", and you're not going to be able to do anything with yourself after that because you're out of shape. There's no woman that's going to look at you if you're a, you know, 40-year-old guy that's basically big and fat. They just don't generally want that, and just average, you know, as well. So you're doing all this stuff for you, not for, you know, retaining her or to entertain her or any of those things. This is for you, and it's on your terms and, you know, within your boundaries. So there's that, right? So I guess dealing now with the, well, what do I do if I'm stuck in a marriage where I'm not getting laid and I'm making all these advances and nothing's happening? Well, I'll put it this way. I think my bud Ryan at one point made it very, very clear that she doesn't own your D. She's got first rights to it. Now, some might say, well, that's unreasonable because you've committed to her in a marriage. Well, yeah. And part of that commitment in a marriage is intimacy. And if she's withholding intimacy from you, well, is that your fault? It might be if you're fat and lazy. It might be if you can't hold down a job. There might be some elements or components of it, you know, that you have to enter in the equation. But also understand, she doesn't own your D, okay? She's got first dibs on it. If she's not exercising those dibs, and you're a top shelf guy, and you're putting the dent in the universe, and you're doing things with your life, okay, well, maybe she's banging somebody else. Maybe she's actually cheating on you, or maybe there's something wrong with her hormonally on a hormonal level and she needs to see an endocrinologist or some kind of a specialist to deal with that. Sometimes women go through very strong hormonal changes after they have children, you know, for example. You can deal with those things separately. But if all those things have been dealt with, you're not fat, you're not lazy, you're chasing excellence, you're on a purpose, you have a grind, you're doing something interesting in your life, you're a handsome guy, you've got some style, you're captivating, you're funny, all that shit that women want you to tick off all the fucking boxes on. If you're doing all that stuff already and she's not responding and you're not getting what you want, guys, lots of dudes go out of the marriage, you know, and I wouldn't blame them, you know, at that point. You can also untie the knot, you can get divorced and move on that way. You know, I've seen certain, you know, scenarios, and again, I've coached thousands of guys now. I've seen everything from guys that are just like, well, if you're not going to bang me, then I'm just going to bang somewhere else. And she's like, that's fine. I don't want to mess up this family. I don't want to screw up the kids. I don't want to, you know, live in separate houses. You know, I like your family. I like the dog. I like everything that we have. And she's just like, just don't embarrass me. Just make sure a woman doesn't show up on the front door, knock, knock, knock. Hey, guess what? I'm pregnant with Bill's kid. And, you know, then I got to deal with that embarrassment, all the bullshit that ties around it. Women, generally speaking, when it comes to stuff like this, going outside of the marriage or cheating in the sense, they just don't want to be embarrassed. It's actually pretty common in a lot of places in the world. It's just in North America that it's frowned upon so harshly. But there are, you know, loads and loads of cultures. I mean, if you go all the way around the Mediterranean, having, you know, like the weekend for the wife and the Thursday night or Friday, you know, for the mistress, isn't that uncommon. If you're a successful guy and you've got those options to exercise, you know, the key being is you've got the options to exercise because you're a top shelf guy. So there's that potential as a solution. I don't think negotiating desire with her is a good idea. I've talked about this many times. I think a woman needs to have genuine burning desire for you. If it doesn't exist, you can't manufacture it. You can't force it on her. You can't negotiate it with her. You can't get it by doing chore play. And all chore play means is, well, if I assemble the IKEA furniture and clean up the kids' room and paint, you know, Billy's room and pick up all the dog shit from the backyard, can we have some starfish sex, please? Right? Like, this is something that you don't want to deal with. It then becomes a level of sex which is considered to be transactional rather than validational. Validational is genuine burning desire. Validational is she will drive 3 hours to come and see you on a work night and, you know, bang the shit out of you just to get that fixing. That's validational. Transactional is I'm going to do all of these things just to get a little bit of starfish sex, right? Or in some cases, guys pay. That's also transactional when you're paying for it, right? You know, with a brothel or prostitute or whatever. So there's that, you know, component. And there's guys that, you know, scratch that itch that way too. They'll go to, you know, they'll just go to the old rub and tug, or they'll go to a brothel or whatever. There's a place in the world where that's legal and you can go and do all that stuff too. So it's entirely up to you on what path you want to take. But the first question I would ask is, did you go through betatization through 1,000 concessions? If you did, it's very, very difficult to fix, you know, if not nearly impossible. So there's that. If you didn't go through betatization, it's not like you're not going to go through it. It's really just boiling down to what extent are you going to go through the betatization. That's the reality of the story for most men. It's not if, it's to what extent. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So deal with the betatization part as well. Do not try to negotiate desire. Therapy generally doesn't work for most people. What most people find out if they go to couples counseling or couples therapy, there's a lot of blame games, and, you know, they'll sit down in front of the counselor for months and years, you know, in some cases trying to hash out the details or to negotiate some realm of agreeability, and all you're ever going to get is maybe a little bit more frequent starfish sex, and you're going to have to deal with a whole bunch of bullshit. It generally doesn't work. Genuine burning desire is organic. It is not negotiated. It is not done in front of a therapist. It is, you know, you get out of the shower and she catches a glimpse of you and she knows that you've got a limited amount of time before you got to throw on that suit and go to that meeting where you're going to close that $1 million deal, and she looks at you and she goes, oh yeah, I'd wear that ass as a hat, right? And she just jumps your bones, right? Like, that's what genuine burning desire. It's organic. You don't negotiate it. It's problematic in some cases where it gets in a way where, you know, some guys look at it like, damn, I can't, you know, get her to keep her hands off me, sort of thing, right? Believe it or not, that happens too in long-term relationships a lot of the time as well. If you've got the right game, if you play the game right, if you become the game, if you become the unplugged alpha, you know, as I like to say. Anyway, so there's all of those things to contemplate when it comes to sexless marriages. There's a lot of things that go into that equation, and, you know, some of it is your fault and some of it could be her fault. You know, there could be shit that she needs to deal with. Maybe she's got hormonal changes after having the kids, postpartum depression. Maybe her endocrine system is completely out of whack. If you're in good shape and other women are throwing themselves at you, there's probably something on her end that needs to be dealt with, and, you know, she'll need to take ownership for that. She may or may not want to do it. If she doesn't want to do it, look, guys, we are not permanently bound to somebody for the rest of our life. Some people have some very strong religious convictions, cultural convictions. Divorce is very taboo. Stay in the marriage and get your exercise somewhere else is another way to do it, right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's a reality of human nature, and that's how a lot of guys do tend to deal with that itch when they want to scratch it. So contemplate that. I would love to hear your comments below. on the topic of guys that are in long-term marriages or relationships that aren't having sex, and what your experience and what your solution has been. A lot of guys out there will just say, well, just don't get married and you'll never have to deal with that problem. And that is one solution to the problem, but it's difficult if you want to have a family, and that's a totally different sort of conversation. But yeah, chop it up in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. Pin in the top comment. There's a bunch of useful links, including my website, my book, my supplements, a whole bunch of other stuff. Check it out. Have an awesome day. Peace.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.